He saved the Apache woman from the river, and the law bound their souls forever. The sun had begun to dip behind the low hills that surrounded Plainsville, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mary Thompson wiped her brow with the back of her hand as she stepped out of the small farmhouse she called home. The air was warm, carrying the smell of wet soil from the recent spring rains, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree that stood like a silent guardian beside her house. Her two children, Lucy and Ben, were playing quietly near the porch, chasing each other with the boundless energy that only kids seem to have. For a moment, Mary allowed herself to watch them, her heart swelling with a mix of love and worry. Life had been hard since her husband's sudden passing 2 years ago. Every day felt like a delicate balancing act between keeping the farm running and raising her children alone. But she had grown used to it. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Mary took a deep breath and glanced at the horizon. Dark clouds were forming far away, moving faster than usual, swirling like a painter's brush on the sky. She felt a slight shiver crawl down her spine. Storms were common in Plainsville, but something about this one seemed different. The air felt heavy, almost electric, and even the birds had gone silent. She hurried to secure the windows of the farmhouse, checking each latch carefully. The wind had started to pick up, tugging at the loose shutters, and Mary could hear the distant rumble of thunder, low and warning. Her mind began to race with all the things she still had to do. Feed the chickens, check the crops, make sure the children had eaten, and ensure that the animals in the barn were safe. As she tied the last strap over the chicken coop door, a sudden movement caught her eye. Across the open field near the edge of the woods, a lone figure appeared, struggling with a horse that seemed just as frightened as the man holding its reins. Mary squinted, trying to make sense of the scene. The man was tall, with broad shoulders, wearing a dusty hat and worn boots, and the horse pulled back against him as if it sensed the coming storm. Mary's first instinct was caution. She didn't know who he was, but then a stronger feeling took over. She could not stand by and do nothing. Dropping the rope she had been carrying, Mary grabbed a lantern and started walking toward the man, calling out in a steady voice, "Hey, do you need help?" Her steps were quick but careful, as the wind began to gust stronger around her. The man looked up, relief flashing across his face, though he tried to hide it behind a serious expression. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice steady but strained. "I think I can handle him, but I could use a hand." Mary nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle over her. She didn't know this man, but in moments like this, she had learned that fear could not rule her. She approached the horse slowly, letting the animal see her and feel her calm energy. Horses were sensitive creatures, and Mary had grown up around them, learning how to earn their trust. She reached out her hand, speaking softly, "It's all right, boy. We're not going to hurt you." The horse whinnied softly, its ears flicking back, but it allowed Mary to guide it alongside the man. Together they managed to secure the animal, and Mary stepped back to wipe her hands on her apron, heart pounding with adrenaline. The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair damp with sweat and a face that looked both rugged and kind. "Thank you," he said simply. Mary smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face.
"Don't mention it," she replied. "You looked like you needed help."
"Can't leave anyone out here when a storm's coming." The wind had grown stronger now, whistling through the trees and tugging at Mary's hair. Clouds gathered rapidly, darkening the horizon, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Mary looked toward her farmhouse, then back at the man and the horse. "We should get to shelter," she said. "My barn is just over there. We can stay safe until the storm passes." The man followed her lead without hesitation, and together they walked across the wet field, the soil soft beneath their boots. The rain intensified, a steady beat on the ground that soon turned into a heavier downpour. Thunder rolled closer, shaking the air, and Mary felt a twinge of fear. But she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand, getting them both to safety. She could not afford to be paralyzed by worry. Not now. Not when someone else's life was involved. Reaching the barn, Mary hurriedly opened the doors, letting the man and the horse in first. The horse snorted, shaking the water from its mane, and the man helped calm it with gentle words. Mary's hands moved quickly, securing the doors and checking the loose boards along the sides. The barn smelled of hay and animals, a comforting scent that reminded Mary of the life she had fought so hard to maintain. Inside, the air was warm and dry, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Mary finally allowed herself to breathe a little easier. The man turned to her, eyes filled with gratitude. "You didn't have to help me," he said quietly. "Most people would have stayed inside and let nature take its course." Mary shrugged, trying to appear casual, though her heart still raced. "I couldn't just leave you out there," she said. "I've learned that sometimes you have to act, even if it's scary. Life's short, and storms, well, they don't wait for anyone." She glanced out the barn doors at the swirling wind and driving rain. The clouds above were dark, almost black, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky in jagged streaks. For a while they stood in silence, listening to the roar of the storm and the frantic beating of the horse's hooves on the barn floor. Mary watched the man, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way he ran a hand through his hair, and the faint tremble in his voice. He was strong, clearly capable of handling difficult situations, yet even he needed help. The realization struck Mary deeply. Everyone, no matter how capable, sometimes needed someone else to step in. As the storm intensified, Mary found herself thinking not just about the man or the horse, but about her children waiting safely at home, and about the fragility of life itself. The sky seemed alive with power, and the wind carried a voice that seemed almost human, warning and demanding respect. She felt a mixture of awe and fear, but also a strange exhilaration. There was something profoundly moving about standing on the edge of danger, helping someone in need and realizing the strength within yourself. Eventually, the man spoke again, his voice calmer now. "You have a brave heart," he said. Mary smiled faintly. "I don't think about it like that," she replied. "I just do what I have to. That's all any of us can do." Lightning split the sky outside, followed by a thunderous crack that shook the barn. Mary's grip on the post of the stall tightened. The horse startled, snorting and stamping its hooves, but the man's steady presence kept it from bolting. Mary realized then that courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about continuing, even when you were afraid. Hours seemed to pass in the space of minutes as they waited for the storm to abate. Outside, the world had turned gray and violent, but inside the barn there was a fragile bubble of safety created by their combined efforts. Mary felt a sense of connection forming with this stranger, a bond forged in the crucible of danger. She didn't know his story, his life, or where he came from, but she knew one thing for certain: helping him was the right choice. And deep down, she suspected that this encounter, brief as it might seem now, would have a lasting impact on both their lives. When the rain finally slowed and the wind began to die down, Mary peered outside at the battered landscape. Branches were broken, fences flattened, and the field was a muddy mess. But everyone and every creature was safe. She let out a quiet sigh of relief, glancing at the man. "We made it," she said softly. He nodded, a small smile forming on his face, and for the first time, Mary noticed a warmth in his eyes. a mixture of respect and gratitude that went deeper than words could express. Mary felt a strange sense of pride and hope. Yes, life was hard. Yes, storms would come and try to tear everything apart. But as long as she could act, as long as she could help, she could survive anything. And maybe, just maybe, she could help someone else survive too. The sky had turned a deep, angry gray, almost black in places, as Mary and the stranger stood inside the barn, listening to the storm's growing roar. The wind had become more violent, shaking the wooden walls and making the roof creak under its pressure. Rain lashed against the barn doors, striking them in sharp, rhythmic bursts. The first flash of lightning split the sky, followed almost instantly by a thunderclap that vibrated through the ground. Mary hugged herself instinctively, shivering at the raw power of nature. She glanced at the man beside her, who was crouched slightly to steady the horse. His face was calm, but she could see the faint tension around his eyes. "I've never seen a storm like this," Mary whispered, though her voice was barely audible over the wind. The man nodded.
"They can be unpredictable, but we're safe here for now." He adjusted the horse's reins, murmuring soft words to calm it.
Mary admired the quiet way he handled the animal. Even in a storm like this, he radiated confidence. She realized that courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and dependable. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, tearing at the trees and whipping the tall grass into waves. Branches broke with a snapping sound, and the rain fell in sheets, pounding the ground like thousands of tiny fists. Mary could feel the barn tremble as the wind pressed harder against the wooden walls. Her heart beat faster, a mix of fear and adrenaline. She knew that tornadoes were common in Plainsville, but she had never witnessed one forming this close. The storm wasn't just a weather event. It was a force that demanded respect, caution, and sharp attention. The man glanced at her, reading the worry on her face. "We should check the barn," he said, rising and walking toward the side where the hay and tools were stored. "We need to make sure nothing loose could fly around if the wind gets worse." Mary nodded and followed him, her boots squelching in the wet straw. Together they secured the doors, moved loose items into safer corners, and tied down the equipment that could become dangerous. The barn was old, and though sturdy, Mary knew it wasn't indestructible. Every gust made her stomach twist with anxiety. Lightning illuminated the scene in brief, brilliant bursts. In one flash, she saw the cowboy's face clearly, strong, determined, and unshaken by fear. There was a calm in his presence that comforted her, a silent assurance that they could handle this together. She felt grateful for it, knowing that fear alone could easily paralyze a person in moments like this. The storm wasn't over yet. It was only beginning to test them. The horse shifted nervously, pawing at the ground and snorting. Mary knelt beside it, placing a hand gently on its neck.
"It's okay, boy," she said softly. "We're here."
"You're safe." The animal's muscles twitched beneath her hand, but it slowly began to calm, trusting the humans who cared for it. Mary glanced at the man, who gave her a small nod of approval. They were in this together, strangers just hours ago, now united by necessity and courage. Then, a sudden sharp gust of wind slammed against the barn wall, rattling the roof and making the windows tremble. Mary instinctively stepped closer to the man, clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The storm was no longer just a distant threat. It was here, and it had teeth. The rain poured down harder, and she could hear the distant sound of splintering wood, trees snapping under the force of the wind. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone, a strange electric scent that heightened her senses. "Stay calm," the man said, his voice steady, almost soothing. We'll get through this. Mary drew in a deep breath, repeating the words silently to herself. Stay calm. Keep moving. Protect the horse. Protect the children. One thing at a time. Her mind worked quickly, cataloging every possible danger and solution. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled in a way that was different from the usual shakes of thunder. It was a low, vibrating rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. Mary froze, realizing with a jolt that this was no ordinary storm. It was the start of something much more dangerous. She looked toward the dark horizon, barely visible through the driving rain, and saw a swirling funnel forming in the distance. Its shape was terrifyingly perfect, twisting upward from the ground toward the clouds, a living column of destruction. "Mary," the man said, his voice tense now. "That's a tornado. We need to stay inside the barn and make sure the horse stays calm. This could get rough." Mary nodded, her pulse racing. She knelt beside the horse again, stroking its mane and whispering reassurances. The sound of the tornado grew louder, a deep, rushing roar that seemed to shake the very air. The barn shuddered with each gust, and Mary's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. She thought of her children at home, of all the work she had left to do, and of how fragile life could be in moments like this. Minutes passed like hours as the tornado drew closer. The wind ripped at the barn doors, and debris from the surrounding fields began to swirl past the windows. Mary held on to the post of the stall, feeling the barn sway under the pressure. She glanced at the man, who was calmly moving to keep the horse steady. His presence was a lifeline, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming danger, steady hands and focused minds could make a difference. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the chaotic scene outside. Mary could see the power lines bending, trees leaning under the force of the wind, and the grass flattening as if pressed by an invisible hand. The rain was now a curtain, blurring the world beyond the barn. She realized that nature could be both beautiful and terrifying at the same time, its energy overwhelming yet strangely mesmerizing. The horse became restless, sensing the tornado's approach. Mary whispered softly, her voice calm but firm, trying to ease the animal's panic. The man joined her, placing a reassuring hand on the horse's shoulder. "It's all right," he said. "We're together. We'll be safe." His calmness seemed to anchor the horse as well, and slowly the animal's frantic movements subsided. Then came a sudden, violent gust that slammed against the barn with all its might. The roof creaked and groaned, and Mary instinctively pressed herself closer to the post. She could hear small pieces of debris hitting the walls, and the windows rattled violently. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself to breathe, to focus on what she could control. She checked the horse, the doors, and the hay, ensuring nothing could fly and injure anyone. Time became strange inside the barn. The storm's roar was constant, punctuated by the cracking of branches and the rattling of the barn walls. Mary's senses were heightened. She noticed every sound, every movement, and every flicker of light. Her fear was still there, but it was mingled with a strange exhilaration. Surviving a storm like this required courage, quick thinking, and trust in the people around you. She had both. As the tornado moved closer, the barn trembled more violently, and Mary instinctively moved to stand beside the man. Together they created a small bubble of calm, talking quietly to the horse, reassuring it, and keeping each other focused. In those tense moments, Mary realized something profound. Bravery wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing fear head-on, protecting those who depended on you and refusing to give in to panic. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the tornado began to move past their location. The wind slowly lost its fury and the rain softened to a steady drizzle. Mary stepped outside the barn carefully, her boots sinking into the mud. The landscape had changed dramatically. Trees were broken, fences flattened, and debris littered the fields. Yet, despite the devastation, she felt a sense of relief. They had survived. The horse snorted, shaking its mane, and the man smiled faintly, a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude in his eyes. Mary realized as she looked around that the tornado had not just tested her courage, it had revealed it. She had acted when fear threatened to paralyze her. She had protected a stranger, a living being, from nature's wrath, and in doing so, she discovered something unimagined. The morning after the tornado broke with a calm that seemed almost unreal. The sun rose slowly, casting pale golden light across Plainsville. Mary stepped outside her barn, boots sinking slightly into the soft, wet earth, and surveyed the damage. The field was littered with broken branches, flattened fences, and debris from the storm. Her heart sank at first glance. Some of her garden had been destroyed, and parts of her old wooden fence lay in twisted piles. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also a strange beauty. The rain had left the soil dark and rich, and tiny droplets clung to the grass, sparkling in the morning sunlight. Mary inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, grateful that she and her children were safe. The cowboy who had arrived the night before, emerged from the barn with the horse following closely behind. Mary noticed him pause, taking in the destruction with a careful eye. "It's bad," he said quietly, more to himself than to her, "but not impossible to fix." He walked toward her, boots squelching in the mud. "I didn't get your name last night," he added. "I'm Jackson McAllister. I'm Jackson McAllister." Mary felt a strange warmth at hearing his name. Somehow it made him seem more real, less like a stranger caught in a storm. "I'm Mary Thompson," she replied, brushing her damp hair from her face. "And you're welcome, Jackson. I just did what anyone would do." She tried to sound casual, but inside she felt a quiet pride. Jackson nodded. "Most people wouldn't have stepped out in a storm like that," he said. His gaze softened as he looked at her, almost as if he were measuring the depth of her courage. Mary smiled faintly, feeling an unexpected sense of connection. She didn't know why, but she felt that something significant had begun the moment they had taken shelter together in the barn. They spent the morning cleaning up around the barn. Jackson worked quietly and efficiently, stacking broken branches, moving loose tools into safer spots, and helping Mary repair the smaller damages to the fence. Mary noticed how skilled he was, not just with the work, but with the horse as well. The animal had calmed considerably since the night before, though it still flicked its ears nervously whenever the wind rustled through the fields. Jackson stayed close, offering gentle guidance to Mary whenever she needed help lifting a heavy plank or tying down debris. As they worked, Mary felt herself beginning to trust him completely. There was something grounding about his presence, a steady calm that countered the fear and tension of the night before. She realized that he wasn't just strong in body, but in character as well. He listened when she spoke, acted without boasting, and showed a quiet respect for everyone and everything around him. Mary had learned over the years that people like this were rare, and she found herself silently grateful for the twist of fate that had brought him to her doorstep. By midday, the sky had cleared completely, and the sun shone warmly on the muddy field. Mary and Jackson took a break, sitting on a large fallen log, drinking water and catching their breath. The horse nibbled at nearby grass, finally relaxed enough to enjoy the calm. Mary watched the animal and then glanced at Jackson. There was a softness in his expression she hadn't noticed before, a quiet acknowledgement of their shared ordeal. "I don't know how to thank you properly," Jackson said finally, his voice sincere. "You risked yourself last night. That wasn't small." Mary shook her head. "I didn't think about risk," she said simply. "I just acted. When someone needs help, you don't stop to calculate danger. You just do what you can." He smiled faintly, as if pleased with her answer. "I can tell you faced hardship," he said, glancing at the farmhouse in the distance. "You have a strength most people don't." Mary felt a pang in her chest. She had faced so many challenges alone, raising her children, maintaining the farm, and dealing with the grief of losing her husband, but no one had ever recognized that strength before. Jackson's words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, warm and affirming. As they rested, Mary noticed how quiet the countryside had become. Birds had returned to the trees, singing their morning songs, and the air smelled fresh, a mixture of wet earth and new beginnings. She realized that storms, no matter how destructive, also carried a kind of renewal. The tornado had taken much, but it had left life intact, and it had brought her Jackson. She couldn't help but wonder what other changes might come from this unexpected meeting. After their break, they returned to the task of salvaging the farm. Mary showed Jackson the areas most in need of repair, and he listened attentively, offering suggestions and helping where he could. They moved broken fence posts, patched holes in the barn walls, and cleared away debris from the garden. Mary marveled at how much easier the work felt with another person by her side. For so long she had carried the weight alone, and she realized that sharing the burden, even with a stranger, could bring relief beyond the physical labor. Throughout the day, Mary found herself talking more than she usually did. She spoke of her late husband, of the challenges she faced raising her children alone, and of the dreams she still held for her little farm. Jackson listened without interruption, occasionally offering a word of encouragement or a thoughtful suggestion. Mary found comfort in his presence, realizing that he was more than just a helper. He was someone who could understand her struggles without judgment. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, Jackson stood and stretched, dusting off his hands. "You've done a remarkable job," he said. "This place is in much better shape than I expected after last night." Mary smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. "Thanks to you," she said. "I couldn't have managed all this alone." Jackson shook his head. "No, you did the hard part. You faced the storm, guided the horse, kept calm. I just helped." His humility surprised her. He had saved the horse, endured the tornado with her, and now he spoke as if it were nothing. Mary realized that true courage was often quiet, without the need for recognition. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Mary invited Jackson inside for a cup of tea. The farmhouse was small but cozy, with the smell of baking bread lingering in the kitchen from the previous evening. Lucy and Ben peeked out from the living room, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Mom, is he going to stay for dinner?" Lucy asked. Mary smiled and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. He helped us through the storm. He deserves a warm meal." Over tea, they talked more freely. Jackson shared stories of the countryside, of his work, and of the small towns he had passed through over the years. Mary laughed at his gentle humor and found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in a long time. The children warmed quickly to him, asking questions about the horse and the adventures he had experienced. Jackson answered patiently, showing genuine interest and kindness. Mary felt a sense of relief, seeing her children feel safe and happy around him. Later, as Jackson prepared to leave, Mary felt a strange reluctance. She had only known him for a short time, yet he had become a part of her life in ways she could not explain. "Thank you again, Jackson," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I don't know what would have happened last night without you." He smiled, tipping his hat gently. "You saved me just as much as I helped you." He said, "Remember that courage isn't measured by how big the danger is. It's measured by how you act when faced with it." Mary watched him walk across the field, the horse following obediently behind. She felt a mixture of awe and curiosity. Who was this man really? Where had he come from? And why did it feel as if their meeting was meant to happen? She couldn't answer those questions yet, but she knew one thing. The tornado had changed more than the landscape. It had changed her life, and it had introduced her to someone who might change it even further. As the evening settled over Plainsville, Mary sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The fields were quiet now, the storm's destruction softened by the golden light. She thought of her children playing safely inside, of the horse resting in the barn, and of Jackson walking through the field with a quiet dignity that lingered in her mind. Life was fragile, yes, but it was also full of unexpected opportunities and connections. In that moment, Mary understood something profound. The storm had been a test, a challenge, that revealed her inner strength, and Jackson, the stranger who had become her ally, was more than just a survivor. He was a reminder that kindness, courage, and trust could emerge even in the most frightening circumstances. She felt a spark of hope, a quiet certainty that life could still surprise her in beautiful ways, even after so much loss. Mary went inside to check on Lucy and Ben, tucking them into bed with gentle kisses. She paused for a moment at their doorway, smiling softly. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring more work, more challenges, and perhaps more surprises. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, comforted by the thought that they had survived the storm together, and that she was not as alone as she had once believed. The days after the tornado were a whirlwind of work and adjustment for Mary. The storm had left the town battered, but life slowly returned to normal. Roads that had been blocked by fallen trees were cleared, neighbors helped each other repair fences, and children cautiously returned to school. Mary worked tirelessly on her farm, salvaging what she could from the damage, repairing fences and planting seeds where the garden had been destroyed. Her hands were raw and her back ached, but there was a quiet satisfaction in restoring order to her small corner of the world. Jackson McAllister had left after the storm, but his presence lingered. Mary found herself thinking of him often, remembering the calm authority with which he had handled the horse and the storm. He had not only helped her physically, but he had also offered reassurance and hope at a time when she had felt powerless. She wondered about him frequently. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why had fate placed him in her path at that precise moment? One afternoon, as Mary repaired a section of the fence that had been torn down, a neighbor named Harold drove up in his old pickup truck. Harold was a well-known figure in the community, always ready with gossip, good or bad. He tipped his hat as he stopped beside her. "Mary, you're a sight for sore eyes," he said. "Heard about the storm, and I just had to see how you're holding up." Mary smiled politely. "We're managing, Harold. The farm took a beating, but nothing we can't fix." Harold's eyes twinkled with curiosity. "I hear you had some help last night. A stranger, wasn't it? Some cowboy?" Mary hesitated, unsure how much to say. "Yes." "He helped with the horse. We stayed in the barn while the tornado passed." Harold nodded knowingly. You're talking about Jackson McAllister. He's quite a man around here." Mary raised her eyebrows. "Jackson McAllister? I thought he was just a stranger who happened by." Harold chuckled. "Far from it, Mary. That man owns more land than most people in this county could even imagine. Half the county, if the stories are true. People talk about his generosity, but very few ever see him personally. He keeps a low profile, so it's a rare thing indeed for someone like him to appear at your farm. Mary's hands stilled on the fence as her mind tried to process what she had just heard. Half the county? Generosity and a low profile? She remembered the man's calm demeanor, his quiet strength, and his humility. It didn't fit the image of a wealthy rancher in her mind. And yet Harold seemed certain. Mary felt a rush of disbelief and wonder. Had she really just spent a terrifying night with one of the most prominent men in the region and never known it? "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," Harold said with a grin. "I'd bet my oldest horse on it. That man doesn't just walk around helping people in tornadoes for no reason. Well, he's a good man, Mary. But he's also a very important one." Mary took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlpool of thoughts spinning in her mind. Suddenly, the events of the night before seemed even more extraordinary. The danger, the courage, the quiet heroism. It was all magnified by the knowledge of who Jackson McAllister really was. She realized she had acted not just with bravery, but without any awareness of the significance of the man she had helped. And yet, in some way, that made her actions feel even more honest and pure. Over the next few days, Mary's neighbors mentioned Jackson more frequently. Some had heard stories of his land deals, others spoke of his charitable acts, and a few even hinted at his quiet, unassuming presence in town events. Mary listened carefully, absorbing the details, trying to piece together a fuller picture of the man she had saved from the tornado. She began to understand that his life was far different from hers. He moved among vast properties, managed cattle herds, and influenced much of the county's economy. Yet when she had met him, he had been simply Jackson, the man who needed her help as much as she needed him to be calm for the horse. Mary found herself replaying the night in her mind, recalling every detail of their interaction. She remembered how he had guided the horse, how he had reassured her, and how, even in fear and chaos, he had remained composed. Knowing now that he was an influential and wealthy man made his humility even more striking. Mary realized that some people's true character only revealed itself in moments of challenge and danger, and Jackson had shown her the best of himself. That evening, Mary sat on her porch, staring at the darkening fields. The children played quietly nearby, and the farm, though battered, was slowly recovering. Her mind wandered back to Jackson, wondering if he had returned to his property and whether he was safe. A small part of her felt a desire to see him again, to speak to him, even though she knew their lives were worlds apart. She realized that the tornado had not only brought danger and fear, but it also opened the door to a connection she had never expected. A few days later, as Mary worked in the garden, she heard the sound of a horse's hooves approaching. She turned, shielding her eyes from the sun, and saw Jackson riding slowly toward her. He was dressed simply, as he had been the night of the storm, but there was a quiet authority in his posture that made her pause. He stopped at the edge of the field and nodded politely. "Mary," he said, his voice calm and warm, "I wanted to see how you and the farm are doing." Mary felt a surge of gratitude and surprise. "Jackson, I wasn't expecting you." She wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "We're managing. The farm has taken a lot of work, but we're getting there." Jackson dismounted and led the horse to a nearby post, securing it with care. "I thought I should check in," he said. "After all, you helped me when I needed it most. I wanted to return the favor in any way I could." His words were simple, but there was sincerity in them that made Mary feel recognized in a way she rarely did. They walked together around the farm, Jackson offering suggestions for repairing certain sections of the fence and Mary explaining what she had already managed to fix. His presence was calm and reassuring, and Mary felt a growing sense of ease around him. She realized that this visit was not just about assistance, it was about connection. During their conversation, Mary mentioned the stories she had heard from neighbors. Jackson listened quietly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "So they've been talking about me," he said lightly. "I suppose that's to be expected. But you didn't care about any of that last night."
You acted out of pure instinct and kindness. That's what matters.
Mary felt a mixture of humility and admiration. "I didn't know who you were," she admitted.
"I only knew that someone needed help. That's all I thought about." Jackson nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "And that is why you have my respect, Mary. Many people would have hesitated. Many people would have looked for safety first. You didn't."
You acted with courage and selflessness. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the field, Mary and Jackson continued their conversation.
They spoke of life, of dreams, of responsibilities, and of the unpredictability of fate. Mary realized that the tornado, while destructive, had brought her an unexpected gift, the opportunity to meet someone who could become more than a stranger, someone who might play a significant role in her life. By the time Jackson prepared to leave, Mary felt a strange mixture of sadness and anticipation. She knew that life would return to its routines, but she also sensed that the events of the storm and the revelation of Jackson's identity would have lasting effects. She had learned that courage, kindness, and trust could transcend social status, wealth, and circumstance, and she had learned that connections could form in the most unexpected ways, sometimes changing the course of life entirely. As Jackson rode away, Mary watched him disappear across the fields, the horse following obediently. She felt the quiet determination settle over her. Life would continue to challenge her, but she knew that she had the strength, the courage, and now the support of someone extraordinary. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Mary realized that sometimes storms bring not just destruction, but clarity, revelation, and hope. The weeks that followed the tornado were a mix of hard work and cautious hope for Mary. The storm had left deep marks on her farm, broken fences, uprooted plants, and debris scattered across the fields. But it had also brought clarity. She knew that she could rebuild, stronger than before. Every day she and her children worked together, clearing the remnants of the storm and restoring the land to its former state. The sweat, mud, and labor felt lighter somehow, as if a hidden force had infused her with determination. Mary felt more alive, more capable than she had in months. Then, one morning, she saw Jackson riding up the lane again. This time there was a calm certainty in his movements, a confidence that made her heart skip. He dismounted near the barn, his eyes scanning the fields as if he were already imagining what could be done to help. Mary felt a flutter of surprise and gratitude. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon, but his presence brought a strange sense of comfort. "I thought I'd come by and see how the farm is holding up," Jackson said, smiling warmly. "And to offer a little help, if you'll let me." Mary nodded, unable to hide her relief. "That would be wonderful. We've made progress, but there's still so much to do." She glanced at her children, who were busy collecting fallen branches. The storm left its mark, but we're slowly getting back on our feet. Jackson spent the day working alongside Mary and the children. He repaired fences with skill and patience, helped replant parts of the garden, and even assisted in clearing debris from the barn. His presence was calming and steadying, and Mary found herself relying on him in ways she hadn't expected. The children grew comfortable around him, asking questions about the horse and listening eagerly to stories of the wide-open countryside. Mary noticed that Jackson treated them with gentle respect, never speaking down to them, and always encouraging their curiosity. By mid-afternoon, they paused under the shade of an old oak tree. Mary handed Jackson a glass of water, and he accepted it with a faint smile. "You've done an incredible job, Mary," he said quietly. "Your farm is in better shape than I imagined it could be after the storm." Mary shook her head, smiling softly. "It's been hard work, but I couldn't have done it without you. You helped me keep calm, organized, and focused. That made all the difference." Jackson nodded, looking thoughtful. "You don't give yourself enough credit," he said. "You faced a storm that could have destroyed your farm and your sense of safety. You acted with courage, without hesitation, without thinking of what you might lose. That's rare." Mary felt a blush rise to her cheeks, but she also felt pride. She realized that the events of the tornado had revealed something about her she had almost forgotten. She was stronger than she knew. She was capable of facing fear and stepping forward, even when everything seemed uncertain. And she was not alone. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting golden light across the fields, Jackson suggested they take a look at the areas that still needed the most attention. They worked together, hammering posts, tightening boards, and moving debris. Mary felt an unfamiliar sense of joy in the labor. The farm was not just surviving, it was slowly thriving again, thanks to their efforts. Later that evening, as Mary prepared dinner for her children, Jackson offered to help. He washed the vegetables, stirred the soup, and even set the table with care. Mary watched him, amused and grateful for the simple acts of kindness. He moved with purpose, yet never rushed, and she felt a warmth in her chest that had little to do with the fire crackling in the kitchen stove. During the meal, Mary's children chattered happily, sharing stories from their day and asking questions about Jackson's life on the ranch. Jackson answered with patience, never skipping a detail, always encouraging curiosity and learning. Mary realized that his presence was more than helpful. It was uplifting. He brought energy, confidence, and a sense of possibility that she hadn't felt in a long time. After dinner, Jackson stayed to help tidy the kitchen. Mary watched him, appreciating the quiet care he took with even the smallest details. When he finally stood to leave, he looked at her earnestly. "Mary," he said softly, "I wanted you to know that my visit isn't just about helping with the farm."
I want to help you rebuild, not because you need me, but because I admire your courage, your kindness, and your determination.
Mary's breath caught.
She didn't know what to say. She had never imagined that someone like Jackson McAllister, the man who owned half the county and had lived a life of influence and wealth, would care so deeply about her and her farm. She felt a mixture of surprise, humility, and hope.
You...
"You don't have to do that," she whispered, finally finding her voice. "I can manage. I've managed everything so far." Jackson shook his head gently. "You've managed well, but rebuilding doesn't have to be done alone. I want to help, if you'll let me." Mary nodded slowly, realizing that this offer was more than practical. It was a gesture of trust, friendship, and respect. She allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Jackson. I would like that." In the days that followed, Jackson visited often. Together they repaired fences, replanted gardens, and even improved parts of the farm that Mary had thought were beyond repair. His guidance was invaluable, but more importantly, his presence gave Mary a renewed sense of confidence. She realized that the tornado had brought more than destruction. It had brought an opportunity for growth, for support, and for unexpected companionship. Mary's children quickly became fond of Jackson. They laughed at his stories, listened intently to his lessons about animals and the land, and began to see him as part of their small family. Mary watched with quiet joy, noting how Jackson encouraged them, respected them in the work and the conversation. It was as if a new chapter of life had begun, one that was filled not just with hard work, but with connection, trust, and hope. One afternoon, as Mary walked through the newly repaired garden, she paused to look at Jackson, who was helping Ben with a broken fence post. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his assistance, but for the presence he had brought into their lives. The storm had been terrifying, and it had left scars, but it had also opened the door to something extraordinary. Mary realized that life could change in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes help and friendship arrive when they are needed most. As the weeks turned into months, Mary noticed subtle but significant changes in her life. The farm was thriving, the children were happier, and Mary herself felt stronger and more confident than ever before. Jackson's visits became a source of joy and inspiration. He encouraged her to take on projects she had never thought possible, to dream bigger, and to believe in her own abilities. Finally, one evening, as the sun set over the fields and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Mary stood on her porch, watching Jackson ride across the farm with the horse. She realized that the tornado, terrifying as it had been, had brought her not only survival but also a new beginning. It had introduced her to Jackson, a man whose kindness, courage, and humility had made a lasting impression on her and her family. Mary felt a quiet sense of peace and hope. Life would always have challenges, storms, and unexpected twists, but she knew that she had the strength, support, and courage to face whatever came her way. And she knew that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come from the most unexpected places. In the weeks that followed, Mary and Jackson continued to work together, not just on the farm, but in life. They shared meals, stories, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection. Mary realized that their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. She also recognized the profound lesson that had emerged from the tornado. True courage, kindness, and generosity are measured not by wealth or status, but by actions in moments of challenge. The farm flourished, the children thrived, and Mary herself discovered a new sense of purpose and confidence. She understood that storms, both literal and figurative, would always come. But with courage, resilience, and the support of others, even the most devastating events could lead to growth, renewal, and unexpected joy. And as Mary watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the fields with golden light, she knew that this was not just an ending. It was a beginning. The tornado had brought loss, fear, and uncertainty, but it had also brought Jackson, friendship, hope, and a renewed sense of life. She smiled, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and anticipation for the future, knowing that no matter what storms might come, she and her family would face them together, stronger than ever before.